You are listening to 91.3 FM KUWS, a joint service of Wisconsin Public Radio and the University of Wisconsin-Superior. My name is Annie Dugan. I am the curator here at UWS in the Kruk Gallery, and I am joined by Erick Wolfmeyer, who is an artist, a quilter, and an all-around fascinating fellow. And we're talking about the exhibition he has on view right now in the Kruk Gallery on Masse. The exhibition is opening Tuesday, October 7th. It'll be on view through November 7th from 3 to 7, Monday through Friday, free and open to the public. Welcome, Erick, and thank you so much for sharing your quilts and sharing your voice as well.
Thank you. Thanks for providing the opportunity. It's amazing.
Well, we're so thrilled to have you, and I would love for you just to tell us a little bit about how you got into quilt making to begin with.
Sure. It's been a while. I've been doing it for a while. Yeah. So 1998, I was on vacation. I was actually living in Northern California in Napa, the Napa Valley. And I was on vacation up in Sisters, Oregon, ironically, a week after a huge quilt festival, which at the time I knew nothing about. I was visiting friends who had just had their first baby, and they were like family to me, my sort of replacement family when I lived out west. And so I wanted to do something special for them, for him. And I thought, well, guess I'll make a quilt. I think a lot of people have that urge, like, oh. And I had never sewn, didn't know anything about it. But the person I was living with at the time had a machine and taught me the basics. And so I did that one from start to finish. It took me about 6 months, which is funny because, now I could probably do it, in a couple of weekends or whatever. But it was a great way to learn. I started with using a pattern. So basically kind of self-taught. And then from there, I just started asking a lot of questions. And I have found over the years that largely women who are owners of shops that are called quilt shops. They don't sell quilts, but they sell fabric that people make quilts with. The owners and workers there are always very happy and generous and full of information and willing to answer questions. So through the years, when I ran up against something I didn't know how to do or wondered about, I just would ask my local quilt shop purveyor, and that's kind of how I got going. And then just kind of took off from there.
Yeah.
So,
And since this is radio, people can't see.
Oh, yeah. Visual arts on the radio.
Yeah.
I love, we need more of that. I've always thought I never hear it. And I'm like thinking we need more. Yeah.
We do. Yeah. So can you describe, I think, so you met with one of our classes this afternoon and someone said, well, how do you describe your quilts?
Oh, she did. Yeah. And I told her that, I get that question all the time. People say, well, what kind of quilts do you make? And I'm just dumbfounded. I don't even know how to answer that question. But then I cleverly turned the question around on the student, and she had a better answer than I did. But essentially, she figured out the gist of it is that all the quilts are essentially autobiographical, but not in some sort of family photo album sort of way. It's all through essentially abstract expressionism, really, where I just use the basic, fairly straightforward, I would hesitate to say, but simple traditions and quilt blocks, the what am I trying to say? The parameters of quilting. The basic traditions, the basic limits that the quilt making sets out, and the way people have done it for decades. And I just try to do as much as I can within that one piece. One of my first quilts in the show has a Bob Dylan reference, which I did especially for you guys because I know he's a big deal up here from Duluth. And it's from the song Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, which was a song that was really very just revelatory to me when I first heard it, and probably still makes me cry when I listen to it. But there's a line, the question he asks over and over is, oh, where have you been, my blue-eyed son? And that was a question that was very resonant for me. And what he says about that song is that it was like he was sort of, I'm paraphrasing, but it was like he was jamming all the things he could possibly do into this one song because he was concerned he wouldn't live long enough to do all the things he wanted to do. And so the song is just very, very dense and very rich with imagery and concepts. And so I thought, well, that's interesting to read that quote about that song that I mean, I had long since already named the quilt after that, but I was doing some research and I thought, well, that's how I feel about my quilts. It's like I really, each one, I'm not sitting around modeling thinking this could be my last one, but I really put all that I can into it of myself. And they are a compilation of all my life experiences up to this point. I'm 58 years old, and they are also a reflection of the times in which they're made. I was telling the students today, these particular quilts were made from around 2016 to the present. So they span things like, my husband and I were reviewing the things that have happened just in that time alone. I'm like, well, COVID for number one. I got married to him, number two. Prior to getting married to him, I had discovered a huge sort of blast of surprise that who my actual father was. I didn't know that for years. Was living under a misimpression about who that was, and that was a big deal. My mother came in and out of my life. I moved to Washington State for a while, came back. I switched jobs a couple of times. It's just like, what? Like, you think back, you think, no, nothing's happened in the last 6 years. And you really stop and think about it, like, oh, well, wait a minute. No, there's a lot. So all of that is in there, is what I'm saying. All of that's in there. It's all of me. So whatever, I really have, over the years, the more I've done it, people ask me, how many quilts have you made? I don't know. I quit counting at 100. But, it's, I start to see patterns of, okay, during this time, I tend towards these shapes or these. So we talked about a visual vocabulary, right? So X's seem to show up a lot in my work, or we have T's. So I would say if you're looking at the show, look for those things. Look for that visual vocabulary. What kind of consistencies do you see? Because one thing that I pride myself on is that not all of my quilts look the same. However, my hope is also that you would know that the same person made them, if that makes any sense at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love, I think I'm thinking of the quilts that people were drawn to. Certainly all of them work and fit in the space, but there's one in particular that is an optical illusion, right? It reads as three-dimensional, right? We're in the sound room, and it like almost feels like the sound blocking equipment that's in this room, right? It's sort of like it comes out at you. And, I think there's resonance there of, these forms that sort of come out into the space and almost like grab the viewer. So that one I think is interesting in that way. And I think you speak so eloquently about the limitations and boundaries, that there's such creative space inside that grid. And that by putting these sort of parameters on things, that it allows you to push and explore. And I would love for you to speak a little bit about that as well.
Two things that come to mind. And this is just me on my soapbox, but I think that we live in a world right now. Two things are true. I think sort of sadly, that it's as if we are obsessed with knowing everything. And granted, I benefit from all. I'm not anti-research. I'm not anti-intellectual. I'm not anti any of that stuff. I'm talking more on that's a sort of existential level or something. But like I still live in an age of wonder. I really want to live in an age of wonder. I'm comfortable not knowing everything, and that's part of my own life story. There's a whole lot about my life. I always say there's far more. I had to come to peace with the fact that there's far more that I won't know than what I will, and it's like, I'll just have to live with that and be grateful for what I have discovered. And so again, getting comfortable with living with ambiguity, living with wonder, not needing to know everything immediately, not needing to turn to your phone and say, what's the answer? Oh, I don't know. I wonder. And I'm okay with that. I'm not saying I, don't eventually want to, find the answer, but I want to be comfortable with not needing to know every single thing right here, right now, and that everything doesn't have to have a black and white answer. And so I think and yet, I think another thing is true, that we want, of course, You order something on Amazon, it's there that morning at 3 a.m. on your porch. Like, what? And so, so talk about a world without limits. That's insane, right? So I want to be comfortable with limits. I think about parenting, love and limits, the two important ingredients. And it's sort of the same way with quilts, is that it's in the limits that for me, that it becomes manageable. And otherwise, I don't even know, I wouldn't know when it's finished. I would become overwhelmed. And so I think that's why quilting, for one of many reasons, is a great medium for me and a lasting medium for me, is that I'm really comfortable in its architecture, in its limits. And by limits, I mean things like traditions, essentially. And really just some geometric limits. But the funny thing is, it's within those limits that literally infinite possibilities exist. And so you see the marriage then of limits and wonder. It all comes together, that I spend 3 days a week in my studio basking in limits and wonder. That's for me, that's really what it is, over and over and over again. And so it allows the ideas that are within me to bubble up and bubble out, and the ideas themselves produce more ideas. So once again, back to good old Bob Dylan, it's like my husband reminds me that it is a wonderful gift to know that that your ideas will outlast you. That you'll have more ideas and you will have lifetime to live. That you die with a pile of ideas is a wonderful way to go. So just don't freak out that you can't do them all. Just do what you do and enjoy the doing of it.
Oh, that's beautiful. So. That is beautiful. Limits and Wonder is a great name for a song. And speaking of songs, you spoke today too about sort of almost each of these quilts. Like I do feel like there's some lyricism to that, right? You have a beat. You have, you have this repetition, and then you have this play and this melody within that. Like that there's just this, it works. The exhibition works as an album, and then each piece, certainly has its own voice.
Oh, you're killing me with this. This is so good. This is so good. This is so meaningful to me. Like, thank you. I mean, it's not just how beautiful your words are. It's a grand, high compliment, especially coming from you. You know your stuff. You see lots of art. I thank you so much. And it could not be more true. And it's so meaningful to me because this is the very part of my life that for so long has been invisible and has not been present, has not been either known or there's been no curiosity about it. And so my father, as it turns out, when I found out when I was 50 years old, my father was a very successful songwriter, and he wrote for people like Eric Clapton and B.B. King and Bonnie Raitt, and on and on. I mean, he was prolific. But we don't know who wrote we know Celine Dion, but we don't know who wrote her song, right? So you never know the name of the songwriter because people always say, "Oh, who's your father?" I'm like, well, you won't. There have been very few people that I've met that actually have heard of him, but he was operating in some pretty high levels, and so. And he was just he lived the rock and roll lifestyle, and he was a big personality, and just lived fast and hard, and unfortunately paid the price for it and died when he was 57 years old. But when I discovered all this, it wasn't so much the fact that my father was friends with Mick Fleetwood and turned down the offer to be in Fleetwood Mac and all of that sort of, or that he lived next door to Jack Nicholson. It was none of that. It was all interesting. Okay, fine. It was that it made my life make sense from the inside out. Suddenly, these empty walls inside of me, the caves, they suddenly had the cave paintings on them. They had words, they had images, they had shape. And I thought, this is where my burning passion comes from. This is why I do this thing that seems so unnecessary and so, frivolous at sometimes, and yet is just utterly necessary to me. So that to hear my quilts reviewed in that framework is like just incredibly meaningful to me. So I appreciate that, and I would say, absolutely. And here's the thing: I believe that would still be true even if I didn't know about my father. I think it's just DNA. I kind of can't help myself because I was making these things years before I knew anything about him. So it just bubbles up inside of me. But I'm not a musician, although I've dabbled in music when I was younger, but I really believe this is my music. These are my songs. These are my compositions. Yeah. So, and again, it's just so lovely to see the work that I have available, curated to this space, and to see it kind of play together. And, that's why I'm an album listener. I bet you are too. Like, if I, now it's always like, press the button and Apple tells you, just will spew songs out at you. But I'll find an artist and I'm like, no, I want to listen to the whole album. Yeah. I want to get a feel for what was going on all around, that one song that we might know. So yeah, I'm definitely an album listener. And speaking of which, in my studio, I almost always have music in the background, and love to discover new things, be it through local radio stations or streaming radio stations from your area, or what. But yeah, music is a big part of what's happening, and I think it helps me kind of fuel and find and ride the emotions and emotional process of the creative process.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm crying, like in my studio, because I'm alone. The blinds are drawn, like no one around, and I can just be with whatever comes up.
That's beautiful. The maybe the A track or the A side would be the large piece right in the middle. So it's called Poppy Field, and it is, you talk about, any of your quilts could be used on a bed, right? They work as quilts, which I think is really, it goes back to sort of like, what are the boundaries that you're putting on yourself, right? But this one is enormous, right? It is, it's incredibly huge. It's sort of this big voice. I love you sent me a beautiful image that maybe we can use as the image that we use when we put this up online, because it's this boat, right?
Yeah, it's a dry dock boat from Bayfield. Yeah, so the original inspiration for the large piece in the show, which is probably, I don't know, I think it's like 24 feet long or something, is essentially about 3 queen-size quilts, all in one. But it was the proportions of it and the largeness. I grew up in Missouri along the Mississippi, and I would see barge traffic, but I had never seen fishing boats like they have up here. I have never seen these big container ships like they have here. And I just love that dimension, that elongated dimension. And the fact that rarely in my life, I had never seen a boat like up on stilts like that, just dry docked, I guess, for the season, up out of the ice. And it was just so great. And even color inspiration came from, it was a red fishing boat. And it just resonated with me. Like, I like that. I found it very satisfying in those dimensions. And so I think I had already been kind of thinking about making a large scale piece. But that was one of the things that kind of took me one step further into, inspiration and curiosity. I like to say that curiosity is I can't even think of it right now. But I'm very interested in curiosity because I think it is like the root. It's where everything starts, essentially, is curiosity. I can't think of my quote. I'm spacing out. Whatever.
You're curious about the curious quote.
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
So, yeah.
I'll come up with it. It'll come to me, my old brain. It'll surface eventually, so I have to give it time.
So can you talk a little bit?
I just figured it out.
Tell me.
Curiosity is the root of imagination. Imagination is the root of everything else.
Oh, it's beautiful.
So that's my OG original.
I like
but
it.
Yeah, it's just, it's only because it's true. It's been true in my experience.
Yeah.
So
can you talk a little bit about certainly the quilting is this very precise. It's the way you do it, is very precise. There's so much control, and I think this comes back to the musicality of this tension in that precision, that control, that repetition, and then this expansive creative voice as well. Where do you sort of lean into both? Do you find yourself, because you've started doing hand stitching now too, which is again like even the motion itself has this breath, right? You're coming up and down, up and down. So it's like, that sort of
ancient. It's like ancient traditions of like that.
Yeah.
Thymus thumping or whatever, walking or any rhythmic activity, repetitive rhythmic activity. Tibetan prayer wheels, bells, whatever it is. To me, it's all an extension of the same vibe. That's where I'm at. Like for me, funny. I don't know, I didn't mention this. But my studio's in a church.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my studio's in an Episcopal church. It's actually my husband's where he belongs. The vestry is very involved in that church. But they have a space where they make it available to folks for very, very reasonable rents, and it's a lovely 13 by 20 space in the Episcopal church basement of Iowa City, Trinity Episcopal. But to answer your question, so like I said earlier, I really rest in the limits and sort of the snug kind of hug of the traditions of quilting, and it's very important for me all the work. I define a quilt in the way we have traditionally defined it, and I'm all the way up to and including hand quilting. All my work is hand quilted, mostly by Amish, but after 2026 will be done by me. It all starts as an idea. It might even, again, go back to curiosity. It may start with curiosity. Then it starts with imagination. And then the imagination forms into an idea. And the idea I put on paper, and graph paper. And then that's where the rubber starts to hit the road. And I think about, okay, well, now how can I make this? How is this quilterly? And because I'm really careful I want to take the medium to its limits, but I also want it to be quilterly, because I'm thinking, if this ought rather to be a painting, then it should be a painting, or if it needs to be a poem, then it'd be a poem, if it needs to be words, if it needs to be something. But how can I make this everything that it can be and needs to be, and I want it to be, and maintain the quilterliness of it. In other words, stay kind of within the bounds while also trying to find the edges. And so it becomes a conversation. I've said for years that making a quilt is a conversation between myself, my soul, my heart, and this medium, essentially. So I pick from my fairly modest collection of fabrics. I pick from it as if it is my palette that I'm mixing paints, and these shapes, this vocabulary that I have, I'm just seem to be repeatedly drawn to the same thing. So there's a lot of Baroque J.S. Bach kind of theme and variation in my work. There are things that I just I'm not even thinking about that I love them. They just pop up. You know what I mean? I seem to be a fan of the X, apparently, or a fan of the T, or these bold, almost, again, architectural shapes that provide structure, provide kind of drama. Provide the lyrics, so to speak. But the magic happens in just, I think, in just being present. I think really that's what it boils down to, is doing this work allows me. There was some famous guy that said art is what everything else isn't, which I love that. And I think the magic happens in simply being present with the work. And while I have a general idea of what I want to do, I am always willing to listen to the work and hear what it's telling me. And maybe I need to shift a little this way, or shift a little that way. Or maybe I need to totally scrap my idea and start over. Or, I have many, many stories of quilts that came about as a result of a little, a left turn that I wasn't expecting.
That's beautiful.
So I have a whole quilt that's based on it was quite a successful quilt. It was collected by, a pretty prominent art collecting family in Iowa City, and it lives in a penthouse suite that I occasionally can see it through the window way up there in the sky. But it was built around a square that I had made that was a quote unquote mistake. That it was like I had made a mathematical error that didn't work for the piece I was going to make, that if I continued, making it would just be an exponential problem. But the block itself, which was about 32 by 32, I'd already invested a lot of time in it, and I didn't want to just toss it. But as it turns out, that became the centerpiece for a whole other quilt that I could have never imagined. And it's called Swim. It's on my website. But so, you just kind of you go in with a general idea, but you don't get too wed to it. don't get too married to that. Like, be open to what the universe might tell you, you know?
Eric, that is a beautiful way to end it, and a beautiful way to say everyone should be present to this exhibition.
Please.
It's up through November 7th at the Kruk Gallery on the campus of UWS. Thank you, Erick Wolfmeyer, for joining us. We so appreciate it. You are listening to 91.3 FM KUWS, a joint service of Wisconsin Public Radio and the University of Wisconsin Superior.